House needs painting, grass needs mowing, where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Mossy Oak and Liqua Molly.
Welcome to Off the Water with Hank Parker. I'm your co-host, Sarah Beth, and you are?
Hello, Sarah Beth. I'm Hank Parker, and it's good to be here this fine day. Fine day.
Hot day.
Oh,
hot summer
yes.
day.
Yeah, hot summer day. I love it. Good time to catch a bass in the hot summer.
Sure
a lot
is.
of people don't go. Bobby Murray, my buddy Bobby Murray, he says he plays golf in the summer. He lets the guys suffer with sunscreen. He said he'd rather wear insulated suit than he had sunscreen. So he golfs in the summer and fishes in the winter.
Well, then, all I'm assuming is he probably looks like a shriveled up raisin with all that sun damage.
I always thought golf was for people that didn't know how to fish.
That's true. That's true. I never understood golf.
Well, it's good to be here. I want to talk about lure design. I did a podcast this morning with the Drurys, Matt Drury, about all things wild, and we talked a lot about hunting. But one of the questions he asked me is, how, I look around and I was studying Hank Parker, and I saw that over the years there were probably 25 different Hank Parker design lures, and there was Hank Parker design rods and reels. How in the world do you sit down and design a lure? And I thought that was a great question, and I never really thought about people that may not fish all the time, and when I say all the time, 150 days a year, that they don't really know how lure development has evolved and how it works and where it all comes from. I'm sure that over the years there has been people that sat down at the drawing board and thought, I'm going to scale out just like you'd write a song. You got an idea. I'm going to come up with this idea, and I'm going to sit down and I'm gonna blueprint a diagram to build a fishing lure. I'm sure there has been those situations, but probably 90% of the fishing lures, and I throw all these numbers out there with no documentation, anything, but in my opinion, probably the vast majority of fishing lures are developed by fishermen when they see they can make some little improvement to an existing lure, or boy, I wish I had a lure that come through that grass, or I wish I had a lure I could get through those lily pads, or I wish I had this, or I wish I had that. I wish I had a crankbait that would run down there where I see all these fish on my flasher. And they develop a bait based out of necessity. So I think lure design, and when he asked me that question, I said, no. None of the baits that I've ever personally designed, I never really sat down at a drawing board. I really never even had a second thought. I designed the baits to help me catch fish. And then if they got out, it was because somebody else saw them or somebody else used them or somebody saw that I had this particular bait and they wanted some, and it kind of catapulted from there. But every lure that I ever designed was designed for me to help me catch more fish.
So you know what they call that, Popo, nowadays? They call that gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping.
You don't want anybody else to know your secrets.
Well, and that's true, That's the one thing about television and tournaments made for TV. Now, man, you can't keep a secret. I could keep secrets for years. I had certain little methods and certain little baits that I didn't even talk about,
Hey, don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, man. I used to take these balsa wood crankbaits and drill a hole in them and put a 3/16 out worm weight, and then I would epoxy that thing over and paint over it, and you wouldn't even know that weight was there. But I could get that bait 2 to 3 feet deeper than you could that same bait without that weight being in it. Man, I never told anybody that for years.
That's extra.
And so you kept secrets, but there are no secrets. But that was one lure that was developed out of necessity. I couldn't get my bait as deep. Paul Elias won the Classic in 1981, kneeling and reeling. He'd take a 7-foot rod, and he was throwing a Bill Norman deep little end, which would run about 12 feet deep. Well, he needed that thing to run about 15, 16 feet deep where he was catching the fish in the Alabama River. So he would stick that 7-foot rod all the way down in the water to the reel. and that would get that bait deeper than he could get it if he had the rod up. So
I would have never thought that would have worked. I thought it would have messed it up.
well, you just had to have, and now we got 7-to-1 reels. He didn't have that. He had probably about maybe a 5.5, 5.6 to 1 gear ratio reel. So when he got a bite, he had to crank fast, pull that rod up out of the water, and then set the hook because he had no leverage to
I
set
wonder
the
what
hook.
people thought when they rode by and saw him.
Yeah, I just thought there was old Paul down on his knees praying again.
Hey, there
Praying
you
he
go.
gets a
He's
bite.
got an idea and a prayer. That's what he got.
Yeah, he was already on his knees, so it was a good time to pray. So he was kneeling and reeling and praying all at the same
Kneeling and
time.
reeling.
But he needed to get that bait deeper.
Yeah.
So everybody saw the kneeling and reeling, and they said, well, what if we designed a bait that you didn't have to get down on your knees? What if we had a bait that would run 17 feet deep? So that bait was developed out of necessity.
Save your back and your knees. Ergonomics.
Well, and help you sell some baits. You know,
Yeah,
that
there you
was the
go.
whole thing with the lure manufacturers. I talked about this on an earlier podcast, but I revisited just the other day. I went to Halton, Louisiana to speak to the high school team for their year-end banquet, and couldn't wait right there in Shreveport to go back to Bacon Bait and Tackle. Man, it is just, I stayed in there this time until I completely ran out of time, about 4 hours, just mesmerized. They've got lures that I never even knew about that were developed in the early 1900s. And some of this stuff is fascinating. Michael Bacon has even got machines that they can turn and spit out like a devil horse, for example, and make about 10 in 1 minute. These machines are extremely sophisticated, and they're 60, 70 years old. And it is just amazing, the technology. And I look at these lures, but as you take this tour of Bacon's Bait and Tackle, and if you're ever in Shreveport, Louisiana, and you love to fish, please do yourself a favor and go to Bacon's. It is it is such an incredible place. They've got every kind of lure known to man. They got the lure that the world record was caught on. They got the lures that were developed in the 1900s all the way up to current age. At one time, that little store in Shreveport, Louisiana, made every rubber skirt in the country. He's got a machine there that I don't know if he shows everybody, but he took his time, Michael did, and showed me how they made rubber skirts, and it's not at all what I would have thought. And it's pretty
Interesting.
sophisticated.
That's cool.
And it was done in the 40s, maybe the 30s.
No AI.
No AI whatsoever. But
Yeah.
as you go back and you look, and I thought about, Matt Drury asked me the question, how do you sit down and design a fishing lure? I looked at all these fishing lures. And I don't know, I've got this thing, Waylon Jennings said I've always been crazy, and it's kept me from going insane.
Yep.
I've just always been crazy. And but I look at a lure, and I can get lost looking at that lure. I can get lost back in time, and I'm thinking, what was going through their mind? They put these little wings on the side of this bait that open and close, and when they chug it, man, this thing will walk like a frog. How in the world did they figure out they put this one higher and this one a little bit lower, this one opens wider, this one doesn't open as wide, and when you pull it, those little wings come out, and it walks, and it looks like a frog swimming across the water. Who in the world came up with that? And that was probably a lure that was built in maybe the 1930s. And then you look at the old Spent Scout. That was a bait that was a skirt on the back, and it was like a square bill crankbait that we have today. And that was made, forever ago. And you look at all those lures and you realize, man, there's been a lot of creative people over the years developing fishing lures.
Yeah, trial and error, I'm sure. Too,
Yeah.
a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, and I'm going to say the vast majority of these lures were designed for a specific purpose. wherever they were, if they were in Louisiana, for example, and they had a lot of grass and lily pads and stuff to deal with, I'm sure that they designed all these weedless baits for those situations. If they were up in Lake Michigan and fishing the Great Lakes, you know, and they're fishing deep rocks, I'm sure a lot of these lures were designed to fall faster, and they could fish them faster in that clear water. And I just get mesmerized looking at all that, and I walk through it, and I look at all these different baits, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of baits. And you think about the question that was asked me, how do you develop a fishing lure? And I can look at them and tell you, a fisherman designed this bait to do a job. And it's just fascinating. So I had to answer Matt Drury. Every lure that I've ever developed, I developed it for a reason that benefited a need that I had. I tell people this is a bit redundant of what I've said in the past. A fishing lure is a tool to do a job. Just like an automobile mechanic would use a box end wrench or a ratchet wrench to take a bolt off or to change a spark plug, or a plumber would come into your house and he would use a pipe wrench to take a pipe loose. You can't use a pipe wrench to take a spark plug out of your car. You can't use a plug wrench to fix your kitchen sink. So they're two different tools for two specific different reasons.
Right.
Same thing with a fishing lure. You know, you can't fish a deep diving crankbait in the lily pads. And it's not going to do you any good to fish a frog in off-colored water when the fish are 30 feet deep.
Right.
They're two different tools, two different lures. And that's the way lures were designed. And then you start to tweak. You know, I became a spinnerbait fisherman years and years ago because of a guy named Key Biggers. And Key Biggers was just an awesome spinnerbait fisherman. He was winning all this money. We used to go to the lake when I was a kid with my dad and turn around and come home because it's too muddy. Water was too muddy. You couldn't fish. Well, Key Biggers, was the muddier the water, the bigger the string of fish he would catch. He was winning all these tournaments going up the South Fork River on Lake Wiley in the muddiest water he could find. That blew my mind. And so he showed me a Zorro aggravator that Stan Sloan, a Hall of Fame bass fisherman from Nashville, Tennessee. Stan designed a Zorro. Well, when I'm fishing, there are a lot of elements in a spinnerbait that doesn't meet the eye. For example, the distance between where the wire comes out of the nose of the lead to where the twist or the R-bend is, the distance of that has everything to do with how that bait's going to roll over. If you could get that the perfect length, then it won't roll over. It'll be more weedless. A spinnerbait is weedless when it's upright because the arm protects the hook. When it rolls over, it's very vulnerable to hanging up. So that little thing makes a big difference. And then I'm sitting there fishing that bait, and I'm thinking, if I could separate that front blade from that back blade a little more by putting a couple extra beads in there and keeping that blade down closer to the tie, then it would be easier for me to get those blades out of balance. The reason you want the blades out of balance is because it gives you more vibration. They work against each other, so you get more vibration. And then if we could take that big 44 thousandths wire and cut it down to a 30 thousandths wire, man, look how much more vibration we get out of that wire. That's how I developed the classic spinnerbait. That's how all that came about. Now, Bill Morgan had a bait called a hog collar, and Bill, let me give him the credit for coming up with the idea on the lighter wire and building a hog collar. But I had them build me some baits, and they jigged up. I had some college kids working for Bill Morgan at hog collar, and I needed some baits in a hurry going to Missouri to fish a tournament, and they jigged up a 3/4 ounce head on a 1/4 ounce mole, on a 1/4 ounce harness, a 1/4 ounce wire harness. So the wire was way too short.
Yeah.
Turned out the best thing that ever happened. That little short wire is what keeps that bait upright, and it won't hang up, so I could fish it in heavier brush than I could have any other spinnerbait I've ever fished in my life. So a lot of baits are by accident.
Right.
You discover. You know, Cotton Cordell, who was a brilliant man. Cotton Cordell is a legend, and I have so much respect for Cotton Cordell, Cordell Bait Company. he made a bait called a hot spot, and they glued the weights in them where they would stay centered. Mm-hmm. And he had some that they used some glue that didn't hold up, so the weights broke loose. Well, when the weights broke loose, they rattled. Mm-hmm. Everybody was dying to find those baits where cotton. Quit gluing them. Leave them loose. Everybody's buying them. They want that rattle. And then Bill Lewis came along and developed a same style lipless crankbait and filled it full of BBs and called it a rattle trap. So a lot of the things that we learn, we discovered by accident.
Well, I'm learning right now because I had no idea what you were talking about for about 5 minutes, but you did a good job of explaining it.
Well, but that's that. You know, the question is, how do you design a fishing lure? Well, fishermen design fishing lures, and fishermen design fishing lures to do a job. And that's how it all gets started. And I look, like I go back to bacon, bait, and tackle. I look at all these old baits that were at the early 1900s, 1910, 20, 30, 40, 50, and you see how paint jobs improved, wire harnesses improved, hooks dramatically improved, but the way these lures walked and what they would do, I mean, they were ahead of their time. They're still very relevant today. Lures that were made in 1910, I guarantee you can take a devil horse right now and go out and catch fish on that thing, man. A Hawaiian wiggler, the first bait that I ever saw, my brother stole it out of my dad's tackle box, and he caught a 3-pound bass. And I remember he and I fighting because he wouldn't let me use it, but it was my turn. He caught one. It was my turn to catch one on it. And I tied it on wrong, and I made a cast, and I threw it in the lake. And my dad, as a first lure, man, Hawaiian wiggler. It was a kind of a spinner bait, you know. But that thing was pretty awesome. It was an inline bait with a lead head with fins on it and had a spinner in the front of it. Oh, man, a skirt on the back.
I did that not that long ago. I was down there at your pond fishing, and I didn't tie the hook on correctly. And I went to cast, and there goes my bait and my hook all the way into the lake.
Hold on. Let's rephrase that. There goes my bait and my hook.
What? I didn't say nothing about that.
Yeah, let's go.
Man,
go ahead.
I just outed myself. But
confession is good for the soul. Go ahead and tell me what bait did you lose. It sure was.
I used one of those they look like the crawdads. I forget what they're called. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, my arc baits. You got in my arc baits.
Sarah Beth. Anyway, all that being said, I wish my brain was wired like that, because the second something didn't work, I would never think, let me go put a weight on the end of this bait and epoxy resin it on. So, I've heard you say before, if you're talking about your past, you always felt like you weren't smart enough. You always told that in school because you had a complication. I'm like, this man is far from dumb. Your brain's just wired differently. They say that about a lot of engineers.
Yeah, I don't know about engineer, but my brain is definitely wired different. But, when you're fishing, you see a need for something, and you see something that may work, and you just experiment. And a lot of times that experiment turns out to be the bomb. It's the difference between catching them. And I watched Wheeler one up on Kentucky Lake the other day snapping a jig. And his reasoning behind it was he was fishing behind some other people, and he needed to come up with something the fish hadn't seen, so he started snapping. That's a technique I've never even thought about, but that's unique. I mean, in that particular situation, and maybe he had done this multiple times, but at some point in time, somebody came up with an idea, let's fish this thing completely different, and taking the same bait and making a different application and making it work. So, and then you look at when the Cinco came out. When the Cinco first came out, I thought you're going to catch every fish in the lake. And then all of a sudden people started rigging it wacky style, hooking it in the middle. Mm-hmm. And now they come up with a little O-ring. It'll slip over it, and you just tie it into that O-ring, and you can catch multiple fish on the same bait. And than a wacky style worm, and how much different that is than fishing a Texas rig or or drop shot or Carolina rig or whatever. So it's a lot that goes into developing fishing lures, and the way that fishing lures are designed are by fishermen to do a specific purpose, and they've kind of evolved to where we are today. And it's
I was just pulling up a list of some of the brand new bass lures of the year. So apparently for 2025, this is the new ones that are out. So the Lake Fork Trophy Lures Pro Crawl. It says a beefed up crawdad like profile with winged arms for natural gliding and enhanced stability, designed for flipping Carolina rigs trailers.
Well, and again, there are people, somebody's figuring out, okay, we need to be able to hover that bait or keep that bait in a zone longer. So let's put wings on that plastic worm. I don't know, I can never explain this, but I fished Carolina rig all my life. And I started out fishing with a worm like Jack Chancellor made famous, called the do-nothing worm, just a little 4-inch worm with 2 hooks in it, 2 small hooks. And Carolina rig, it had a little cloth harness inside of it that connected the hooks, and you tied that little cloth to the little string that came out of the nose, and you fished at Carolina rig, and it would just seem like it'd catch every fish in the lake.
Right.
And I was fishing a tournament, and I think I was in Lake Martin in Alabama, and I drew a partner that he had not caught very many fish the first day, and I had caught a pretty good stringer fish. And so I'm fishing a ledge out on offshore structure, the high spot on Lake Martin, and I pull out there and I throw the same Carolina rig worm that I had thrown the day before, and my partner is throwing a lizard, and he catches the first fish. He catches the second fish. He catches the third fish. And I said, what's the deal with that lizard? He said, I don't know. I really don't know. He said, I drew a partner 2 tournaments ago, and he killed me with this lizard. And he said, I switched. I hadn't even thrown a Carolina rig worm since I started fishing this lizard. There's something special about this lizard. I don't know what it is. Well, I don't know if it's the way the legs suspended up in the air or up in the water column and keep it higher. I don't know what it is, but a lizard is magic. I said, you've convinced me 3-0. I'm fishing for my life.
Fishing for my life.
How about help a brother out and give a man a lizard? And of course he did, and a very good partner. And we both limited out. And I mean, that lizard made all the difference in the world. That's been 35 years ago.
Right.
99% of the time right now when I fish a Carolina rig, it's a lizard. And I can't give you an explanation exactly why that is, but I will catch more fish. And no matter who's in the boat with me, if they're throwing a lizard and I'm not, they'll catch more, or vice versa. Yeah. It's just something special. So you learn little things, and then you try to be analytical about it and say, okay, what is making that lizard work? Is it the legs? Is it the tail? Is it the way it glides? Is it the way it sets in the water? What's the deal, and why is this more effective?
They just like it. No.
Well,
that would be my answer.
then you start figuring out ways to make your bait more subtle, but yet perform like a lizard. It's like these guys that are fishing minnows today. The new technique with forward-facing sonar is hover. You want to hover over top of the fish. When I fished with Britt Myers Jr., we were fishing deep. And so fishing deep, the wind was blowing. And I thought, well, I probably need to go to a heavier head. So I went I left a 3/8 and went to a 1/2 ounce. And Britt said, I can't get them to bite that 1/2 ounce.
Yeah.
I said, what's that? He said, no. He said, even though you're going down there 50 feet deep, and obviously you can get down there further and you can have better control with your line, for some reason I can't seem to hover my bait as well. So I have to stay with the 3/8. But they would take little razor blades and cut little grooves and flatten that bait out where it'll hover better.
Yeah, that was the number one thing that pulled up for newest technology in lures right now It's all for sonar based things. So that is like suspended jerk baits, soft swim baits, vertical jigging baits for that sonar. And apparently how it works is it has hard wires through the bait, so it reflects a better sonar, so you can see it better on your system. So I didn't know that. I mean, I thought that was interesting, but that's what you were saying. They're doing like a lot of suspension right now. The second one, hydrodynamic fin and tail engineering. So designers are using fluid dynamics modeling to shape fins, tails, and appendages that mimic real prey better at any speed, such as lizards, frogs, crawdads, those types of different things that are prey.
As far as seeing your bait, Fish Formula came up with it's almost like toothpaste texture, Fish Formula with the sparkle scales like from 100 years ago when they were such a popular attractant. And but they've got some air reflecting something inside of that toothpaste that you put on your baits called bait pop. And you can actually see your lure better on your screen by using bait pop. So there's a lot of that going into where we are today with what we need. And all of this is just like those lures at Bacon Tackle Company in Shreveport, Louisiana that was made in the 1900s. Same principle.
Yeah.
We got a problem. We need to develop something that will solve that problem.
Right. But I mean, and again, with new technology comes new tools, new baits, like what we were just saying with bait pop and like some of the more suspended jerk baits, things like that. The third one is the biorealism skin layering that a lot of companies are starting to catch on to. So they're using multi-layered soft plastics or painted finishes that create depth and shimmer like real fish scales. And some are using UV reactive layers or glow zones that they call it, and they charge under the sunlight. So the lures, they change based on the light conditions like fish do in nature. So it's more reflecting the natural environment, which is ultimately the goal. You want to trick the fish, you know. The fourth one is scent capsules and micro-release chambers. So having embedded scent reservoirs in the lures that slowly leak attractant as the lure is retrieved. So I think it's crazy. Yeah,
it is crazy. But lures have always been crazy. I mean, fishermen have always been crazy. Look how many lures we have today. I need a second Z521 Ranger just to pull behind my boat to keep all my stuff in.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. You barely have enough room for all your baits.
Last year when they said, I have never seen so much stuff in a Ranger boat in my life. How much stuff do you have in here? Well, I used to be in the racing business, so I have these parts carts. And you can roll them up to your race car and you keep all the parts for that particular car on your cart. And then so you just mark it whatever chassis number your car is. And so you know always that parts cart goes with that car.
Yeah.
So I kind of incorporate that into, I've got a bay boat and I've got a bass boat. So
right.
Whatever I take out of and I'll fish with my bay boat. I'll go out. We're going in just a couple of weeks down to fish with the Newberry Boys Farm. We just got through fishing with the Outdoor Dream Foundation.
Yeah.
And then I'll go 2 weeks after that. I go down to Venice, Louisiana, and I go red fishing.
Yeah, look at you.
Yeah, come on.
How about fishing 366 days of the year?
I like that. I wish I could do that. But my point is, what I put in that bass boat, I don't put in that bay boat. And what I put in that bay boat, so I put them on the parts cart. So last year when everybody said, I can't believe how much stuff you got in that boat.
I can.
I weighed it. I thought, I want to find out. I had 700 pounds of stuff in my boat. Now, that's rain suits, life jackets, throwable devices, lures, rods, and reels, but I took over 700 pounds out of that boat.
Well, just rub it in.
That's just what I'm saying about fishermen have always been crazy. So as you start talking about all these wires inside of a lure to reflect sonar better, none of that surprises me. It doesn't surprise me because we're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to enhance and make things better. And that's the way lures have been designed forever. So I think it's really important. when somebody asks a question, how do you go about designing a lure? You let the fish design it. You let the structure design it. You let the situation design your bait for you. And that's what you do. And that's how they develop. So it all came from a silly question, not a silly question, but it all came from a question that I'd never been asked before in my 50 years of bass fishing. How do you develop a fishing lure?
Right. Well, right here at the end, I'm just going to list off the rest of these that are kind of new to the market. So the multi-material hybrid bodies, auto leveling weight systems, micro vibration engineering, sound engineered rattle chambers, shape memory plastics, and then this one is completely brand new, and we've mentioned it in a podcast prior, is the AI inspired testing. So what that is some companies now use machine learning to test thousands of retrieve simulations in 3D environments to design the optimal action path for lures. So it literally will tell you where to put your lure. Isn't that crazy?
That is out of my league. I'm glad I'm old, but I still like to fish, and I like to fish for fun, and I don't mind experimenting and doing different things. I'm not ready for AI. I just assume we just hold off on that about 30 years and let me die and go on. And
wait till Hank Parker passes away. And then
come on. I think Dance and I will both be in heaven looking down and saying, boy, it's gotten crazy down there. I'm glad I'm up here. Of course, I'm going to be glad I'm up there anyway.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. But it's a question that I think was a great question and worthy of answering. I said a silly question. It wasn't at all a silly question. It was a person that doesn't fish all the time that's curious how in the world do you go about doing a Hank Parker signature lure? Where did that come from? And
that's where it came from.
That it's something that you have a need, and my buddy Kevin Langle developed a bait called a hovercraft, and that was an improvement over a bait that was built in the 60s or 70s, I should say 70s, late 70s, and he improved that bait, and I bought that bait from him, and then I had it redesigned and re-engineered to change it a little ways that I like it. Right. And I didn't intend to bring the thing to market. I really didn't. I just wanted to catch fish on it, and it was a killer bait. Man, it was just such an awesome bait. Yeah. And so I didn't intend to bring that thing to the market.
Well, now look at you now. I was going to say, if any of y'all are interested, he actually has his own bait website now. It's hpbaits.com, and that link will also be in the description below. You've got your classic spinnerbait available and your pawpaw crankbait available in different colors.
We're working on a few other ideas. Eventually, I'm going to reintroduce the Hank Parker signature spinnerbait, where I have an outside barb on the center of the hook with a hook pointed downward, and you put the rubber band from the tie on the spinnerbait around the barb, that's the second barb that's on the outside of the hook, to keep it weedless. And it's the most weedless bait ever made, most weedless spinnerbait ever made. And I'm excited about it. Eventually, we're going to bring that out. But there's a lot of discovery. You look, when I signed on with ARC, I didn't know a lot about ARC. I knew Randall Tharp. And Randall Tharp has always kind of been a hero of mine. He's a gritty fisherman. I mean, he's got a lot of grit and determination. And I watched him on the tournament trail. I remember a tournament in Alabama, the Classic. I thought he was going to win, and he ended up not winning, but he just did an awesome job. And I listened to his philosophies, and I thought, boy, he sounds a lot like me. I mean, he's really where I came from. And so I kind of related a lot to Randall. And so Randall's designs and works with Louis over at ARC, and I thought, man, I'd like to be a part of that. So I reached out, and with a little bit of work, we got hooked up through a buddy of mine, Davey Taff, who is in the marketing business, and he lined that up, and we were able to put that together. But at the time, I didn't know. I knew ARC had an awesome jerkbait, and I knew they had a Randall Tharp jig, and it's a killer jig. I mean, a jig is a lot like a spinnerbait. There's a lot that you really have to look for to see the subtle differences that make all the difference in the world. And that Randall Tharp jig at ARC has all of that. So, but that little lipless crankbait, I had no earthly idea. That has got a completely different wobble. It wobbles with the tail, more than it is a totally different wobble. And my grandson Boone and I were fishing up on Lake Norman, and I was throwing one. And he said, Papa, I think I'm going to throw this. I said, you can throw anything you want to, but I'm going to tell you there's something special about this bait. It's working. And
don't lose it.
Hey, about 30 minutes or 40 minutes of throwing 4 or 5 different kind of lipless baits, including my pawpaw, he's back on the arc.
Yeah.
It made all the difference in the world. So I've done a lot of discovery. They're square bill. Arc has a square bill. They have 3 different size square bills, which I like that. But they will come through structure that no other square bill. And a lot of square bill companies, they cheat and put smaller hooks on there. That way they don't get hung up. Arc's got big hooks, and it'll steal the angle of the way that body hits the brush. So there's a lot of discovery. So there's a lot of different baits on the market and a lot of different brands, and they may look in a package somewhat the same. But until you throw all these different baits, those little subtle things make a big difference.
Right.
I tell people all the time, I've had the privilege over the years working with Major League Fishing, FLW, and which is now a part of Major League Fishing, but Bass and FLW, and I've been there on the dock when the fishermen are getting their boats inspected, going out in the morning. I'm looking, they got their rods and reels and tackle all laid out. These guys have all got similar looking stuff, but there's little bitty subtlety.
Like little difference.
Subtleties.
Subtleties, yeah. Subtleties.
That make all the difference in the world. And so one guy may have this lipless bait on, and he's not catching them. Another guy may have that arc on, and he's catching the fire out of them. So the little things make big differences. So I tell people all the time, it's tough on these moms for these high school kids because they're just like me. They want everything. They want to try everything. They want every brand. They want every fishing lure. Every day is Christmas. I don't have enough tackle. They want more and more and more. And poor old moms got stuck with going to Bass Pro and figuring out what lures to buy, and it'll break the bank.
Yeah, it will quickly.
But you need to know. You got to get them. You got to have them. There's some things that are necessities in life. You don't have to have bread and water, man. You got to have fishing lures.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you can go to the water.
I'm not going to comment on that.
It's all good. It all stemmed from a question on the designing a fishing lure. What does it take to design a fishing lure? And to summarize the whole deal, fishing lures have been designed by fishermen for all these years, starting probably in the 17 or 1800s, trying to figure out how to solve a problem and make something that looks realistic to get a bass to bite. Mm-hmm. And as I look through the ages and all the museums and Bacons and going through all the stuff, it's amazing to me how all that has evolved and still evolving today.
Right. Yeah, that is pretty cool.
The same foundation that all this thing was built on is where we are today. We're building a bait to solve a problem, to be a tool to do a job.
That's never going to change either. The circumstance, the technology will change, but the reasoning behind it won't.
Let's get these AI lures out of here. We don't want AI lures. No,
we'll see.
No, okay.
Anyways, well, with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. We want to thank our sponsors, Mossy Oak and Liquid Molly, and make sure you check out all of our links in our description below.
That was pretty good. We appreciate you guys listening and watching, and hope we'll see you next week. God bless you. For Sarah Beth, bye-bye, and for Hank Parker, I'll see you next time.